What we're going to discuss today is users, user security, adding users, changing passwords. A lot of people, I guess, aren't even aware that they have this ability to do this. Some users probably don't, based on security. But I'm going to show you how to do it. So when you're logged into Permittrax, I'm just going to jump right in here. When you log into Permittrax, you'll notice this configure button over here. If you don't see this configure button, then you don't have the security necessary to get to modifying users, adding users, and so forth. So if that is the case, and you believe that you should have access to that, reach out to us, and then we'll reach out probably to whomever at your jurisdiction kind of is in charge, and says, yeah, that you can have this access. So in our hosted environment, it's a special access. We have only one person that's on premise, and they actually have a different kind of access. They have full access to the system. But when I hit on this configure button, it takes me to this page here. It's our configuration editor where we can modify the security groups and we can modify the users. So let's talk a little bit about how security works. Security works in groups. Let's put it into an idea of like maybe finance, code enforcement, reviewers. You can create different types of groups, and then you can assign those groups different security options. So let's say you create a code enforcement group. They can only deal with and see code enforcement permits in the system. That's all they can see. They can't search and view anything other than the code enforcement types. You can give finance maybe access, but or maybe like an administrator's type access that's just read only. It's like, yeah, let the mayor and everybody else be able to get in there, but you don't want them to be able to change anything. So you can just give them access. They can see everything, but they can't change anything. So that's how security groups work. And a user can belong to multiple groups. So when you log in and you go somewhere, it looks at what that security option is across all your groups. And if you have access in any of those groups, then you get access to do that. So I can create a group that's like a read-only group, and then I can create a group that lets you do code enforcement full access. So when you pull up a code enforcement, you can actually have access to everything. But the read-only group can go into all the other permits. They just can't change anything. So, but if you go into any code enforcement, you can. So that's how groups work. So when we go into groups, I only have this one connection right now. So it's our test connection. There's no data in here. This is just something that we can mess around with. And so you can see I created a group called users. So I can add a new group and I could call this, I'll just do code for code enforcement. And then once I go in here, I can edit this and say they only have access to Permittrax, nothing else. They can't change their password. And then over here, we don't see anything because I don't have any consoles in here. But if I had like a building console or a code enforcement console, I can add that type to this group and then decide what they can do in that group. So can they add conditions? Can they remove conditions? Can they modify them? Can they, every single kind of thing that you can do in a permit or an address or a parcel, you can set what they can and can't do. So those are our groups. The next thing is users. So if you have a new user coming in, this is where you're going to go. You can set up and add that user to the system. So if I go to users, you'll notice here, I have only one user. I logged in as test. And I have only access to just the one group. So when I click on edit, you're going to see here, I can now say they're part of this code group. You can see that there's this other group called admin, and that is the one. That's why this user is in green, and it shows us up here. Users highlighted in green have admin roles and have access to modify these users and security. So these green users are the ones that have this configure button. So if you don't have this configure, it's because you're not part of this admin group right here. So if I add a user, let's just add a new user, and I'm going to just say, I'll go with Bob, first name Bob, last name The Builder, and bob@gmail.com. And I'm just going to do a dumb password. As I'm adding this user, this is where you would check the box that says this user must reset their password the next login. So if I update this, so I got to give them I have to add them to a security group. So I'm just going to add them to the users group. They're not going to be an admin, and I don't care about the code enforcement because the users is going to be able to do everything. So I just say update. Now you can see it's white, it's not green because they're not part of the admin group. So if I go here, and I log out, and I go to Bob. So see how Bob doesn't have the configure. They can't do anything. So they're not going to be able to go in and add users, change security groups. They have to be part of that admin. So so if I log back out and go into my test account and go back to configure. So that's a big item to remember. If it's green, that's kind of like major user mode. I don't know what else to call it. You know, there's kind of call it God mode. You can do everything. You can set up users, delete users, change users, emails, and so forth. But one of the cool things about this is if you get a new user, and I know that user is going to be working with Bob or is the same kind of security as Bob, I can easily just click on this clone button right over here. And that allows me to clone. And what it does is it pulls up the security that user has access to. Now I can change this, but the cloning is going to allow me to automatically just add all that security as the same as the user I'm cloning. So I can come in here and put in a user ID. Now, there's another thing that you need to be aware of, especially this is in our hosting environment, which is pretty much everybody. I know, like Tina Hickey from Des Moines, that's her user ID. So if I go in here and say, Amy, let's say this is a new user, you're trying to use that. And if I try to update that, it's going to tell me that user ID already exists and can't be cloned. So you might be asking, like, well, I have Test and Bob. Why how come T Hickey? Well, this is a shared environment. So T Hickey is being used at the city of Des Moines. So it's not going to tell you where that's at. It's just telling you that user ID is already being used somewhere else. You know, I have a few people that I think we've migrated over that have like front desk, test. You know, if I created test, so if somebody went in there and tried to create test, it's not going to work because test is a user ID has already been used. So when it comes to this user ID, you have 20 characters here to put in a user ID. We usually do the first initial last name, but in this case, this wouldn't work. So you can just do like TA Hickey or T dot, you know, it doesn't let you do underscores. So it's going to only let you use characters that are valid. So you can't use a slash, but it's up to you how to create that user ID. But our usual go-to is first initial, last name. Um, I hope within the next year we're going to be changing this so your logins are not going to be based on that user ID. It's going to be based on your email address, because that way we're going to be able to connect users into Office 365 for being able to log in and authenticate, so you can actually manage your users a little better using Office. So that is how we can create a user, and these are our security groups. So we also have a connection filter. So if I have a live and a test environment here, you can actually have users that have access to the test and the live. So that's going to be the different security groups. So if we go in and look at some of your stuff, you'll see people have a checkbox for the L and the T, which is going to be your live and test environments. So, but sometimes you might want people to just have access to test and test only, or live and live only. It's up to you. So you can actually define that based on your security groups. So another way of looking at your groups, I go back to my configure home and I go back to my security groups. I select my connection, my test connection here, and I go to users and I edit. Up here at the top, we've got view group users. So this is now going to show me all the users in this group. And it's also going to show me the users that aren't, and I can turn them on and off. So this is a good way where you've got like a big group of people, or a code enforcement, and you're like, who's in my code enforcement group? You can look at that group access and see all the people that are in that group, or who's in my admin group. You're not going to see that admin group in here anyway. So that's a special group that we create on the back end. You can't create a group called admin. It won't let you. So even if you try, I don't think it will. It's going to crash. Yeah, it's reserved. You can't use that. Um, so, so that's how we set up the security, and then that's how you can go in and add users. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? If so, put your questions in the chat. No questions? That means everybody's got this. They get it. Well, I'm going to go in here real quick. Was this in my system here? I don't have anything. Okay, it's not going to let me. Oh, it did let me. Okay. So you can see I just created a console. It doesn't matter what it is. If I come back over here to my groups, my configure, go to groups, go to my users, you'll see now I have a console over here, BLD. So that console I just created in here. So I can add that. And you can see now all of the stuff that I can turn on and off on a console. So, addresses. So I can associate an address, change the primary address, modify the unit, or remove an address. So I can turn on and off what people can do on the BLD console. So, and then that's going to be, I'm in the user group. So I can create different types of groups and give different types of security of what they can and can't do. So, and of course, we've got some little special things here. I can say enable all, disable all. If I say all access, it goes in and adds all consoles and gives full access to everybody. So those are some little shortcuts. So that's how we can set up each console to have its own security of who can do what. So I know we've got some places that, there's an address console. You can go in and say, users can go in and view addresses, look at addresses, maybe even modify certain things, but they can't add an address. I know Des Moines is that way. You have to go through the GIS um, uh, person to actually add addresses, and they get put into the system because they just don't want a bunch of junk addresses in there. So, uh, so we got Kristen.
Corey, you
So
do have a question from Kristen in the chat.
yeah, I
She
just
is
see that.
asking whether it's best practice to set up your security groups first, then the users.
Yes, that's what I would do. I would set up the security. But usually what we do, if I was to go look at any of my any of you guys, we usually set up two groups, an administrator group and a users group. That's our default. The administrator is going to be most likely most of you that are here on this training today. Those are going to be people that have access to this configure, the back end, maybe you add inspections or whatever. So anybody who has access to this administrator um, from over here, that's going to be a user group. And then we create a users group. And that users group, we give them access to all consoles, everything, full access across the board. Um, I've had people say, "Oh, I want to lock this down. I don't want people to be able to do that." And I'm like, "Well, if you don't allow people to do things, then they can't fix their own problems, and then they have to go find somebody that has security and access to do those things." Remember, also, we have very good logging, user logging, and audit trails. So if anybody tries to do something, and you go, "What happened here?" You can always run that report and find out who did it. I'm not a big fan of locking people out of doing things because you're just slowing the process down trying to get things done. Uh, but I understand sometimes you have problem people that go in and just start deleting and doing stuff and taking it in their own to go in the back end. Maybe if you give them administrator access and they start messing around, it's like, oh, I'm going to go create my new fees, and then all of a sudden nothing's working anymore. It's like, well, you didn't do it right. I'm going to delete that. I don't want that in here. So is there any other questions? I mean, Kristen, when we get you set up, and actually, Kristen, we've got you set up already with some basic security settings in the system. So, and I think right now there's only just a couple of you in your system as we're implementing it. So, cashiering group locked down that address ad. Yeah, we're still clean up from making up addresses in the past. Oh yeah, that's probably one of the biggest problems is addresses anyway. Because when somebody comes in and they've put it on paper, you're assuming they know where they live. And I think Edmonds, when we first started this, that was one of the things that you guys taught me was a lot of people don't know their real address. Especially people live on corners. A lot of people will come in, the city of Edmonds or within the county or another city, but just because you have I think Moss, or you're going to probably have that problem too a lot in Latah County. People coming in that uh, don't even have, they're not in the county, they're in the city, but they think they're in the county. So, uh, street, avenue, place, yeah, that one's a hard one. Try to normalize it when we bring it in. But when you bring stuff in from the county as well, addresses, that can be a nightmare as well because they don't care about the addresses. So that is one of the big things I wanted to talk about today is just how to add users. If you need to go in and change their password. So once you're logged in the dashboard, there is also this configure button here to get you to the configuration. So if you need to change somebody's password, you just click on edit and then just put in their password. You can either put in a password for them, or you can type in something that's simple, like we usually do bitco123, and then check the box that says you must change your password the next time you log in. So if I do Bob here and do test, update, and then get rid of this, get rid of that, and I'm going to log out. I'm going to do Bob Pest. Because I checked that box, it should have. Did I check the box? Thought I did. Maybe I didn't. I know this wasn't working, but I thought I got it working again. Oh, there it is. Okay. I don't think I checked that box. So you check the box, you're going to require them to put in a new password. Now, of course, that doesn't prevent me from using the password you just gave me, but they now have access. Yeah, will they get an email, or do we need to send them what we need? We reset to you. Need what it doesn't send an email to anybody. So right now, that's one of my issues at the moment. Test is we're going to have to go through and make sure that everybody's email address here is a correct email before we move over to letting people log in, and make sure there's no duplicates or just junk email. So yeah, so once usually you're going to get that because somebody's going to call you up and say, oh my gosh, it's been a month since I've been in the system and I forgot my password. So you could just log in here, click on that, put it in, then email them back and say, hey, use this password. It'll ask you to reset it when you get in there. And they can log in and reset. So it's a good thing here. We can look at the last login. So if I go here, log out. I made the mistake of turning this off. There we go. Oh, come on. Don't watch what's happening behind the man and behind the curtain. I did it again. Yeah. Oh, okay. I don't know why I'm doing that. Oh, it doesn't matter. So now I'm logged in as me. I'm a super user. So that's why we see these things up here. These are application settings and stuff. But if I go to users now for me, I can go in here and see all the users within the system. So this is everybody that has a user. But one of the nice things is we have this last login date here. So you can see there's a lot of people that have never actually logged into the system. So we have to make sure all of these email addresses, there's a STD user. Don't know where that's even from. Covington Water. So whatever that user is, it's never been used. So we need to audit these users, get out the ones that don't need to be in here, get the email addresses, the ones that don't have emails, make sure that verify all these are correct. Then we're going to probably switch over that you log in with your email and not your user ID. And then we're going to start working on integration with Office 365 for those who want to use that as well. That's the goal for the future. And that's a big goal. So does anybody have any other questions? This also that you can do some filtering. So when you're looking at your list, so if I come over here and go to like Cheney, these are all the users for Cheney. So you can see these green ones are the ones that have access to users. But you can see there's people here that haven't ever logged in. What was I going to say? When you have a lot of users here, if I'm looking for Susan, Lucas, as I start typing, and this is by either ID, user ID, first name, last name, or email. So if I wanted if I'm looking at everything here, all of them, I can type in Cheney, and I should see everybody that has an email with Cheney in it. So, or at city of Cheney. So here's all my emails. So it's easy for me to look if you got a whole bunch of people in here. So does anybody have any questions on adding users, setting up those groups, changing passwords? It just seems to be something that we get a lot of support requests on, and people are like, I didn't even know we can do that. One last added bit on that is when you go to your dashboard over here on this menu, and you go to documentation. In here, dismiss, I want to scroll, thank you. Users and security. So here's your hosted, we click on that. So here's all the users on how to add a user, change a password, set up security groups, configuring them. And then there's some files, stuff for FTP access for those that have FTP access. But if I go into these, I believe, yeah, see, these haven't been set up with the new version 7 pictures, but it's basically the same. You got that configured. You're going to go to users. You can click on your users, add a new user, fill the stuff in. We need to update the images and maybe some of the stuff here. Changing a password. Click on the little thing here. We'll get these cleaned up and changed for the new version 7. This hasn't been updated since 2021. So we're going through and started going through and cleaning a lot of these up with the images and making sure it gets set up correctly for you guys. So we'll get on that. We'll put that on our list. Is there any questions on security and users? Because if not, I do want to take a moment here. If anybody and everybody wants to see the latest, you guys are all the people that probably would want this. The latest and greatest thing that I just added to your system that some of you have probably noticed and didn't know was there. To kind of do a little wave in the chat if you want me to go over that, or if you guys are done and you want to leave. Nobody's waving. So, oh, let's see it. Oh, Jesse, I know you want to see it. So, okay, I'm going to log out of here. Let's see here. I'm going to jump over to, let's see. You know what? We're going to mess with Jesse's. Okay, we're at Latah. And I'm going to go into your test environment. So one of the things that we just added is for attachments. People have been asking about this and they want folders. So I can now add an attachment. One of the things that I did change is when I go to add, I can just click. And I don't have to then automatically say, okay, it's going to automatically take those files and upload them. So I changed that to where it just drag and drop them, it uploads them, you're done. You don't have to sit there and say, yes, those are the ones that I chose to upload. It's going to tell you right away if there's any problems, if the files are too big or you tried to attach too many. But you'll notice this new column here called general, this folder column, and they all say general. So I can now edit these and I can say which folder does that belong into. Well, right now, the default for everybody, I did ask some people to give me a list of things that they thought were normal. And then I decided I'm just going to start off with just general and archive. And then on the back end, we can change that. So I'm going to just put this one as archive and say update. So you'll notice that it's not listed in my attachments. So if I go to attachments, anything that has a folder of archive will not be visible. It's basically saying it's there, just don't see it. And up here it tells you there's one archived attachments. If I hover over that, they also will not be visible in Citizens Connect. So even though it was marked as public, anything that's archived will not be visible in public. So I can, it's kind of a way of saying, I want to keep this file, but I just kind of want to push it away. But I have these are in the general folder. Well, with that, I can go to administrator and I can go to my settings. And down here, we have this attachment folders. I don't have any not security, but I don't have anything in here to check to make sure that what you're typing in for folders will meet the requirements, because the folder can only be 40 characters long. So, but I can say plans, comma, picture, comma, other, comma, legal, whatever I want to do, and say update. So now if I go over here, I say, let me see, I got to reload this. If I edit, you can now see I have different folders. I say, oh, this is in the pictures folder, and this one over here is my plans, update, and then over here, this one is going to be in my other folder. So now I will see them when I first come in, but if I'm just looking for plans, I can just click on plans and I can see my plans folders. Or I can look at my legal. I talked to Kristen this last week from Edmunds, and one of the things I want to add into this is when you add a folder, we're going to probably put like a special character or something in there that says that folder will also not be visible to the public. So you can either archive it, or we can create like a legal folder that anything that's in the legal folder will not be public. So does everybody like that idea, to be able to create a folder and say that folder is just not a public folder? If that's where we're at with the attachments, is the ability to create folders. Does anybody have questions on it, or is there something that you would like to see in that folder? People have been asking about this for a while, and they want to be able to see that information, be able to group it.